This webinar is being recorded and will be available for viewing soon at the website www.emeraldashborer.info. You will also find the recordings for all previous EAB University webinars there. Thank you so much for attending today. And Cliff, please share your screen, or you've got your screen up there. Just we'll unmute you and you can start your presentation.
Thank you very much, Robin. It's a pleasure to be with you this morning to talk to you about emerald ash borer. This is sort of, those of you who were here last week, this is a bit of a continuation of these pair of presentations. And the first one, which was last week, was focusing on just the basic biology of emerald ash borer and some principles about how it can be controlled. And today I'm going to be talking about emerald ash borer from the concept of how to manage individual trees to how to manage trees in neighborhoods and communities. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with by just reviewing some of the basics for those of you who couldn't attend last week. We start off by saying, you know, why indeed are we here? Well, we're here because emerald ash borer, as you know, kills ash trees, and we assign some value to the ash trees. So I'm going to review about how emerald ash borer does this and why trees are considered valuable to us in the urban landscape. So, you know, when we first started doing this in the way back, we had just a few states that had emerald ash borer, but now it's in 33 states, and it probably is coming to a state near you. It's pretty much throughout North America wherever ash tree is, with the exception of Mississippi and possibly some trees on the West Coast. And this is what emerald ash borer does to the tree. This, as you could tell, this is a picture of a golf course taken in midsummer. And you can see the green grass and a lot of the green maples and the shrubberies in front. And in front of you, you see dead ash trees. And these dead ash trees, you know, are on a very manicured place. Lots of times I go to different parts of the country, and people tell me that they take really good care of their trees, and there's no way that any insect would even think of killing their trees. And here's a perfectly good example of showing how, in fact, it can kill the trees no matter how well you take care of them. So you're going to have to use some sort of control in order to protect your trees. So how does that actually kill the trees? Well, let's start by reviewing the life cycle. Right now, in the end of September, a lot of the emerald ash borers are in a larval or a larval stage. This is the analogous to the caterpillar of a beetle. But they're not caterpillars, we call them larvae. And they make this classic zigzag shape, as you can see over here, and they you see beneath the trunk. And then in the fall, some of these will be going to what we call the J-shaped stage just before they make a pupa, which I have in my tweezers over here on the left. And then in in April, they'll finish their pupation, and then the adults will come out in May. And you can see they have their backs are flat, their bellies are round, so they make these D-shaped exit holes. They will fly up into the canopy of the tree where they will mate, and then they will lay eggs in July. And then they will, the eggs will hatch into these larvae that bore directly into the trunk, and they go through several molts and get large again, and they repeat the whole cycle. One of the critical things we want to think about is that they are forced to feed on the leaves during the summertime. And they do this so that the females can get enough energy to mature their eggs and fly to new trees. Males get energy so they can fly and mate. And once they mate, they can lay eggs, and I got a nice video here that'll show you how the emerald ash borer is laying eggs. And I want to direct you to the hind end of this beetle over here. And if you look on the hind end, you're going to see this tongue-like process, which we call an ovipositor, and here it sticks out right about now. Don't get seasick, right about now, okay. And it is going to find a little nook and cranny. It's looking for it, now it found it. And now it's pumping out a few eggs, and it's laying them on the underneath the bark. And the reason they do that, they hide it, is that some of you may have noticed an ant earlier on in the video. Ants consider insect eggs kind of like protein-rich snacks that they'll eat, and they're just hiding it from predators. So this very emerald-colored beetle, metallic green beetle, will lay upwards of about 80 eggs per individual. And as a result, just having one beetle, you can wind up having 80 larvae, and that can cause a considerable amount of damage on a tree. And here she's laying her last egg inside the crack over there. Okay. Now, so once the eggs are laid and the eggs hatch, they will start feeding into this area called this EAB feeding zone over here in the lower right. This cambium and floor area is where these larvae are feeding. These are them actually feeding right here, right now. And as they get bigger and bigger and bigger, they will start etching this yellow tissue beneath, which is called the xylem, or the sapwood. And the active sapwood basically are tubes of tissue tube. They're basically the piping that goes from the roots up to the leaves, sucks the water from the roots to the leaves. And when these things etch those leaves, tubes, they diminish their function, and it's impossible for them to suck the water up. So imagine if you're sucking a straw out of a glass of water, out of a glass with a straw, and somebody pokes a few holes in it, you become less and less efficient at being able to do it. And then so basically the leaves are becoming starved of water. They dry out and they die from the top. But so now I'm going to talk a bit about tree size, and I often talk about trees in terms of inches. I'll talk about a tree with a 20-inch DBH, and if I call it a 20-inch tree, you're thinking, is that a tiny little sprout? What is he talking about? What I am talking about here is the width of the tree, the diameter of the tree at breast height. Okay, so here's this guy. His hands are right about chest level. We're talking about the length. The length from we're talking about the length from this point to this point here. So if you measure a straight line across here, that's what the diameter really is. Okay, and so what you do is the way we do this is you just take a tape measure, go around in a circle, okay, and I want to get this out of here, turn the pointer option off. Okay, so you basically take your tape measure, measure the circumference, and divide by 3 to estimate the diameter. So if you've got a 30-inch circumference tree, you divide that by 3, it's about 10 inches wide. Now, those of you who remember your geometry know that this is an approximation, because the actual formula for diameter is dividing the circumference by pi, which is 3.14, but it's fairly close. So just think about dividing the circumference by 3, and that gives you an idea how wide your tree is. Okay, now trees have value. I told you they have value earlier, and we like them because they look nice, but they also have some values which can be quantified. One of the things we can think about is the property value. There are numerous studies to show that when you have a shade tree in front of your house, it increases the value of your home. And that, of course, is important to the city, because as your house values increase, they get more taxes based on that, and that helps them provide the infrastructure that they need. That you need when you live in the city. It also helps with heating and cooling costs. So basically, natural gas and electricity costs are a little bit lower because trees actually will shade homes and will actually allow. It reduces the need for heating and cooling. And then, of course, this other part is stormwater, which is something which should not be underestimated. A number of communities have used the stormwater absorbing capacity of a tree to justify their emerald ash borer treatment programs. Every single city has to pay for processing stormwater that goes through the sewers, and it costs a lot of money. The city of Fort Wayne, Indiana, which lost 14,000 trees, wound up having to pay an awful lot of money for stormwater treatment after it lost the 14,000 trees. And each 18-inch diameter, 20-inch diameter ash tree can block 2,500 gallons of stormwater over the course of a year. So when you have 14,000, you're talking millions of gallons of water that have to be cleaned, and somebody has to pay for it. And so the city finds that it's cheaper to keep trees alive than it is to pay extra money for stormwater processing. I'll talk more about economics later. Okay, so I'm mentioning about insecticide options, and I talked about this last week, but I want to review this again and bring up the concept about treatment and removal costs. Insecticides work by when you put the material at the base of the tree, so it goes up into the leaves, or if you inject the tree, it gets up into the leaves, and that kills beetles that are feeding on the leaves, so they're eating poison leaves. Or if the larvae are actually in the tree, the insecticide will move across the tubes that suck up the water, the sapwood, across into the phloem, and they can actually kill beetles. Now, there are 4 different types of insecticides that are used. All of these are systemic. And by systemic, I mean that they actually go through the vascular system of the tree up into the leaves. And as I said before, that's where they kill a lot of the adults. We've got imidacloprid, which might be called merit. There is dinotefuran, which might be called safari. Emamectin benzoate, which could be called triage. And there are a number of other treatments that are out there. This is essentially a 4% solution. Azadirachtin is a neem product. And all these products kill emerald ash borer to some extent, but they're a little bit different. Let's look at the right column over here to give you an idea of the relative toxicity of these insecticides to the adult beetles. Beetles need to feed for a couple of days to be killed by imidacloprid. They have to be feed for maybe an hour or two with a dinotefuran. Only 1 or 2 bites will kill them if they feed on emamectin benzoate. And the azadirachtin does not kill the beetles, although it does reduce the fecundity. So it doesn't kill the adults. It reduces the number of eggs that they can produce. All the products will kill the first instar larvae. That is the little maggot, or that little larva that crawls out of the eggshell. And then after it molts again, the second larval stage, it'll also kill them. So everything kills the small stuff. Emamectin benzoate kills all larval stages, as does the azadirachtin. But imidacloprid and dinotefuran only kills the first 2 stages. And a lot of this information is based on a recent publication by some of my colleagues up in Michigan, and where they did a laboratory evaluations to look at the toxicity of systemic insecticides to emerald ash borer larvae. So they had to peel the larvae. They had to peel these trunks. They actually they developed these artificial diets that they used for these assays. And basically, just like what I said, imidacloprid, imicide, or you might be calling it, there's other products, the Bayer tree and shrub product that's poured at the base of the tree. It takes days for the adults to die. And the larvae just generally don't like to feed on the insecticide-infused diet. And they practically starve to death. It takes about 48 days for 1 part for a single dose to kill half the population. Then dinotefuran is more toxic. They die after eating a few bites, but they also avoid feeding on the diet, and it's about 34 days for them to be killed. And then the adults of a methylbenzolate dye after eating only 1 or 2 bites. And they actually, the larvae actually readily eat the impregnated diet. That's probably why it's more toxic to them. And it takes only 23 days for this 1 part per million to kill them. So it's highly toxic. The adult fecundity was reduced for azadirachtin, and the larvae will also readily feed on the infused diet, and they die in about 15 days, 12 to 15 days. So you can see that there are 4 different ways to kill these insects, but all of them work in one way, shape, or form. So, okay, laboratory studies are all well and good for guys like me who are scientists, but what about the homeowner? What does this really mean? Well, can you actually save trees? Well, my colleague Dan Herms in Ohio did some work on some trees which were 14 to 20 inches in diameter. Remember I showed you that slide about how to measure how wide the trunk was? And these are some fairly substantial trees, and the white line refers to the amount of canopy decline, how much canopy was how much of the canopy did not produce leaves. In other words, this is the amount of leafless canopy. In 2006, basically, there was almost no canopy decline in any of the trees. But by 2010, all the trees that were not treated with insecticide had lost their entire canopy. So that was 100% canopy decline. Trees that were treated in the spring with a single rate of imidacloprid or Zytec, which are all these are imidacloprid formulations, a single rate in the spring, or a double rate in the fall, or even a double rate in the spring. Basically, we had much lower levels of canopy thinning. It did peak in 2010, but it went down, and the trees started to recover 2 years after all the untreated trees had died. And this shows you that applying this product in the fall doesn't really help much to protect them from emerald ash borer, but applying it in the spring works. You have to use twice the rate in the fall to get the same level that you do in the spring. So, but the main point is that these imidacloprid soil drenches indeed do work. I'm in the process of conducting a study with my students here in Eagle Creek Park in Indiana, just outside of Indianapolis, and we're working on some really monster trees. My 6-foot-tall graduate student Donnie, former graduate student Donnie on the left, is standing next to a tree which has a 40-inch DBH. That's 40-inch wide diameter. These are monster trees. They're close to 150 years old. And what we did was we were tracking the canopy thinning, just like Dan Herms did in his study over a period of years. And we do this every August. And some trees were not treated. This is these dark triangles, and you can see that when we started out, there wasn't. We were just starting to see the beginnings of canopy thinning. But in 2014 to 2015, we went up to 60% canopy thinning. 2016 to 90%, and then this summer we had 100% canopy thinning. So there was not a leaf left on the untreated trees. But what was interesting is that when we applied this product in the spring we started in 2013, we found that we did it once in 2013 and once in 2016. These were actually injected at 5 mils per inch. Okay. And we found that we held our canopy thinning to less than 20% throughout. When we waited to the fall to make the first treatments, that gave the trees another summer. That gives the beetles a whole nother summer to actually start causing injury. And we started noticing increased levels of canopy thinning on the fall treatments. But then eventually, it never quite hit the 100% level that we have here on the untreated stuff. So what's nice is that both these trees are actually starting to recover. So I think which is nice to know is that even if you start seeing some early signs of injury there, if you treat these trees, you can actually save them. And then because these trees are so large, 39 inches, this is the average size trees. We have some trees which were as high as 62 inches. That's over 5 feet wide. There's really no limit to the size of the tree that you can protect. And this is by injecting them once every 3 years. The label says right now to inject it once every 2 years, but we think you can actually get away, even at the peak density of emerald ash borer, which was when we did this. We did this at the peak when the population was peaking in the area. We got excellent control by treating them once every 3 years. Now, tree injections. Tree injections are, you have to be trained in order how to do it. There's a really nice bulletin put together by Sean Bernick and Tom Smiley about how to inject a tree. They talk about making sure that your drill is fully charged, making sure that you have a sharp bit, making sure you use a helical bit so that it cuts and doesn't grind holes into the tree. And this is really important because if you're grinding holes in the tree and the bit gets hot, what you're doing is you're cauterizing these wounds. It makes it very difficult for the product to get up into the tree. So, take-home message, hire a certified arborist to do this. They know what they're doing. They're trained. This is the International Society of Arboriculture, of which they are all members, because that's how they maintain the certification. And they can buy these books to tell them how to be sure they're injecting properly. All right. Now, that said, I think I started the beginning of this talk by discussing about the biology and talking about the feasibility of control. Yes, it is definitely possible to control emerald ash borer. We know how to do it, but is it worthwhile? Is there any kind of financial justification? And I want to talk to you a little bit more about that. And that's really important, from the standpoint of the individual and the standpoint of the community. So let's go look at the standpoint of an individual. Let's review some 10-year cost estimates for protecting a 20-inch diameter, 20-inch DBH ash tree. So if you were to remove and replace that tree, it would cost $880, okay? And I get that by saying it costs $22 per inch of diameter to remove the tree if it's not near a target. And that means that if the tree's in your front yard and it's not going to fall on the power line, it's not going to fall on your car, it's not going to fall on your house, it's about $440. And this is a standard estimate I got from the city of Indianapolis. It's what they use with their contractors. And if it's next to the house, though, that it could be easily $60 an inch. Okay, it could be 3 times as much because if the tree is next to the house and it's half dead and the branches are all brittle, it could be upwards even further because they have to bring specialized grapplers and hooks and all these sorts of things to hold the tree so that the tree doesn't. Because when the tree is being cut down and shaken really hard with a chainsaw, branches can fall off and it becomes very dangerous to both the person who's removing the tree, and if it's right next to your house, it's even more dangerous because it can go through your roof, through your living room window, or whatever. So this is a bit of a low estimate. Now, I'm assuming it costs about $400 to buy, plant, and stake a 2-inch diameter tree, a 2-inch caliper tree. On contrast, treating the tree only costs $660 over a 10-year window. And that means you apply it in year 1, you apply it in year 4, and you apply it in year 8. Okay, and I'm assuming that the trees grow a ½ an inch of diameter every single year. And so that translates to $660. So just from a practical standpoint, if you're trying to make your decision, in a 10-year window, you're going to say, well, at the end of 10 years, what am I going to have? At the end of 10 years, you have, it'll cost you either $880 and you'll have a tree that might be about 4 inches in diameter, of a 4-inch DBH, because it's been allowed to grow for 10 years, okay? Or you're going, or 4 or 5 inches, or you're going to wind up having a tree that would be, instead of being 20 inches, it would be, say, maybe 22 or 23 inches in diameter, and it only costs you $660. So you're paying more money to have less tree if you are removing and replacing it. So if your tree's healthy, and you like having trees in front of your house, you're gonna at the end of 10 years, you're gonna wind up having this tree. So on a personal level, it makes very much sense to protect your trees rather than removing and replacing them, especially if you want a tree. Now, if you've got 6 trees in your front yard and one of them is an ash tree, you may just want to remove that tree because the other trees will fill in. All right, but if your primary shade is this one ash tree, you're really better off keeping it alive. Okay, so now let's try to think about this on a community level, and that means let's think about the population, how the populations move, how they grow, and how ash trees actually decline over time. So my colleagues, in Fort Wayne, Chad Tinkle, he was able to share with me the rate at which trees were removed from Fort Wayne. He removed them as they died because these trees, weren't really receiving an awful lot of treatment. And so it was found in 2006, and then basically we had a model where we suggest that the proportion that are going to be removed will double every year. So in 2006 we started with 1%, 2%, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64% in year 2012, and by 2013 we had 100%. And so the predicted is the black line. That's what we assume by this doubling model, and this is the actual numbers of trees that were removed is the blue line. So you don't have to be much of a statistician to say that our doubling model pretty much approximates the rate at which trees die. And what we want to think about when we're thinking about trying to save trees is we want to think about this bunker concept. We would like to cover these trees with some sort of insecticide, protective insecticide during this period of time as the population of emerald ash borer is building in order to keep the trees alive. We call this the bunker concept. So imagine these concrete bunkers. You take your healthy tree, hide it here for a couple of years under the insecticide ring halo, and then basically once the trees are gone, then you can sort of ease back on your insecticide use. What's critical is that you're going to have to intervene early to save your ash tree, so that we know that trees that are less than 10% thinning, we know we can save. If it's 30% thinning and the tree, and you can envision the parts of the trees being removed and there's still a tree left, that's worth saving. But here we have a tree that lost the top half of it. We may be able to keep this bottom half alive, but the tree is going to look ugly, and it's really not worth investing money into doing that. Now, one of the things we found out was that our doubling model fits. Not only does it fit the rate at which trees are removed, but it also fits the rate at which the trees accumulate damage. So we in Lafayette, Indiana, we were tracking the number of trees we had 150 trees that we started out with, and we tracked the number of these trees that would have more than 30% thinning, which was this threshold that I talked to you over here. Anything more than this, we're going to assume can't be treated. And we tracked the accumulation of these trees, and we found and so we predicted with our doubling model, up until 2015, where we expect the doubling model, we were able to see a nice sustained relationship. But what happened was that in we found that the observed model just followed the predicted model quite nicely. So what we see is that we're able to stage our infestation by simply tracking we know where we are inside it. So essentially, this happened again in Som Park in Indianapolis, where we were further up the road, where we were losing trees. So what we were able to do is we're able to come up with an idea of how you stay. So basically, what we're saying is that once you're at this point where 64% of the trees are have lost where the trees have lost on average of more than 64% of their canopy, more than 2/3 of their canopy. The only thing left we have is just a chainsaw. Okay, so we try to think that maybe, and this is the stage where we can still save trees, and this is here the chance we have to remove and replace trees. So so this is somewhat useful, and we have this cost calculator we developed that allows you to stage your infestation. It basically it tells you the number of years until all the trees are lost to EAB and you need to use a chainsaw. You can implement this staging procedure by surveying equal numbers of trees that have less than 10% canopy thinning and between 10 and 30%. And then if you record the trees in the second year that have gone from to greater than 30% canopy thinning, it tells you where you are what year you are in your cycle. So if you have 1 out of every 6 trees, or 16% of your trees, losing more than 30% of their canopy, you are in year 5 of the infestation. So you had better be planning to get your treatments out this year, or maybe this year, because the next 2 years is just simply going to be too late. So what does this cost? Does it make any sense? I'm doing some simulations using, these are the Indianapolis prices I hear for removal and replacement. This is a made-up forest of 1,600 ash trees using a bulk discount rate for using emamectin benzoate, and the assumption is that if you're going to treat a lot of trees, you're going to get a bulk discount count because it's a lot less expensive to deliver the product if you're doing it en masse, and if you're doing it one at a time, because it's less driving time and so on and so forth. We're assuming it costs $5 per inch of DBH with aggressive treatments once every 3 years through year 10 of the cycle, and then afterwards, you would just inspect your trees every 5 years and treat. You would treat as needed, which could be maybe once every 5 years. And we compared replacing unsalvageable ash trees that have lost more than 30% of the canopy, proactively replacing them, or saving trees that were just less than a certain size. And we found that if you start early, before it was detectable, in year 1 of this 10-year cycle, we find that the costs. If you start early, we find that this is the actual cost. When you if you're reactively replacing your ash, replacing them as they die, you compress all your removals in a short period of time, and you have a very high cost over a 3-year period. If you're proactively removing and replacing them, you have a different situation. And then if you are saving, if you're placing your small trees, you wind up having a lowered costs. And so what happens is that even if you start early, you start late, you find that your lowest costs are when you are actually saving all your big trees that are greater than 12 inches in diameter. And we find that over a 25-year scenario, the cumulative cost is more expensive to keep these, to remove and replace trees, than it is to save your largest trees, all your trees which are greater than 12 inches in diameter, whether you start in year 1 or you start in year 5. And basically that means that when you save trees, you wind up having a bigger forest at the end of the process. So not only does it cost you less money, you wind up with more trees. So it costs you less, and you wind up having more trees. So it makes an awful lot of sense. And what I did was I thought, if you start at 5 year in your 25-year cycle, I made some cost comparisons. The first, I decided to cost the amount that it produces. It costs to produce a certain amount of benefit in dollars that would cost per meter of diameter breast height. So basically what I'm saying is, how much does it cost to make a tree 1 meter, the equivalent of a tree 1 meter square in diameter, and this is the cost over 25 years. And if you're paying $5 per inch, okay, for treatment, you wind up spending $625 if you're protecting just the big trees, $866 if you're treating just half the trees, $650 if you're treating the best 80%, and less than $600 if you're treating them all. And what this says is that this is less than a third of what it costs to reactively replace or proactively remove and replace all your trees. If you're spending $10 an inch, say this is the individual rate rather than the bulk rate, you're still paying less than half, less than half of the cost over a 25-year cycle. You're paying less than half of what it costs just to remove and replace it. So any way you slice it, it's going to save you or your community an awful lot more money. Okay. So, and the other thing which is interesting is that, even if you wait until you start seeing the beginnings of damage, it's not too late, because it's really hard to convince people, because, the last part I want to talk about is how to mobilize communities. And, I'm going to talk about why communities fail to act. I've been talking about this economic argument for years now, and so have my colleagues, and it often falls on deaf ears, because the money that you may have to spend in the future is not as important as the money you're spending now. So people just generally aren't really concerned about it, and they often wait until the tragedy is at their doorstep before they actually make a decision. And if you do that with emerald ash borer, it's really too late. And I'll explain to you why that is. This picture over here is a picture of a street that is loaded with beautiful ash trees. And unfortunately, these are asymptomatic infested ash trees that I took a picture of in August of 2016. All right, and this is when you really have to get in to start treating your trees. It's really hard to generate a call to arms. People have to spend, if these are, say, 20-inch trees, and they're going to have to spend $200 a tree to treat one of these trees. It's hard for them to cough up the cash this early in the process. Okay, and the photos that I took is in this blue arrow over here, and it's about 400 yards away where I found emerald ash borer in 2015 on a dinky little parking lot tree over there. So it's really hard to detect the infestation early in the ash decline curve, but it's really important for you to act, because this is really your window between year 3 and 4. Maybe in year 5, when you're going to be able to actually act. Okay, I did my simulations as if we were in year 5 over here. We actually acted in year 5 over here, but you really got to get your act together over here, because once we're over here, it becomes difficult. And this scenario is much more common. When the trees are starting to look like this, it's very easy to detect the problem, but it's too late to save, and that's because we are in the tail end of this thing over here. So someplace around here, between 6 and 7, once you have lost one out of every 3 trees is beyond the point of saving. It might just be a little bit late to try and save those trees, and most of these things are ready for the chainsaw. So this is why it's very difficult for communities to act. So my goal is that if we can actually get folks to sample their trees and know where they are in the cycle over here, so we can say, okay, your trees look great, but your trees look fantastic, okay, but you've only got 2 years to get your act together. Then they're going to get their act together, okay, and they'll start doing something, because at this point it's just way too late. So we get things moving by through this concept called this Neighbors Against Bad Bugs program we have. It's at EAB-Indiana.info, our Neighbors Against Bad Bug program. We have a little slogan: act now, save trees, and save money. We've done this for a number of years. It was actually started, Chad Tinkle started doing some of this stuff in Fort Wayne in 2008. He started getting community bids together so that they can have a smaller or lower prices for their treatments. In Indianapolis in 2011, there was an area called the Abate in King Park area of Indianapolis. They got that one going over there. And then now in 2016, they began, actually there was a project in Shelbyville and a project down in Evansville where people will adopt trees, or they worked as communities to be able to get a group rate. So, for example, an arborist that was doing the treatments in Shelbyville said that he would give the citizens that signed up for treatment a municipal rate if they signed up, so that before they actually they put their treatments on it. And in that way, they can actually go to they could drive up to the community and then treat everybody all at the same time, and that been going back and forth to Indianapolis, where they were based in. So, boiling this all down into a summary, okay, I'd like you to think about this urban community emerald ash borer action cycle. And this is, it looks like a lot of numbers here in graphs, but let me, bear with me, I'll explain it. This line here refers to the percent of the maximum of either trees that have more than 30% thinning, which means that they're too damaged to save, or and that's what this black curve is over here, which I call the affected ash. And you see it goes 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 100% of the trees, okay, over an 8-year period. This is how the trees, the damaged trees accumulate over time. And this axis here refers to time in years. These diamonds here are the populations of emerald ash borer. And the emerald ash borer population pretty much tracks the population of these 30% trees until when you have 100% of your trees at 30% at least, that's when you hit your peak of your emerald ash borer population. And then as there's fewer and fewer resources for the emerald ash borer to feed on, the population goes down, and then eventually the population never goes down to zero, but it'll start going back up again when there are more trees for them to start feeding on again. Because once they kill all the trees, there's nothing to feed on, the population pretty much crashes. So, but this is kind of what we have here. So you have, so initially is that when emerald ash borer is found in your county, you want to get people to just be aware of ash trees. So, maybe have a community tagging event, because most people do not know what an ash tree actually looks like until it's starting to die in front of their house. So if you at least put some purple tags on there, they'll have a feel for at least the scope of the problem in their community. Then, if you could sort of set up a set of, say, of 150 trees, 100 trees, that are 50 trees that have lost less than 10% of their canopy, 50 trees that have been between 10 and 30%, and then just track these trees over time on an annual basis, you'll be able to know where you are in this invasion cycle. When it bounces around here, you don't know what's going on, but as soon as you start seeing it increasing from, say, 4 to 8% of trees losing more than 30% of their canopy, then you know something's up. And then that's when you really need to start getting your act together. And so you can start your control either when it's in the county or when you start seeing the whites of their eyes, so to speak. You start seeing as soon as you start seeing any dieback from emerald ash borer, that's when you want to really start to get your treatment. Because once you go beyond year 6, there's really not much hope for doing anything else but working with a chainsaw. We've developed these couple of tools that you could use. Anne-Marie Nagel, she was working for me. She developed this decision-making guide, which talks about how to determine a DBH. What you do. You start off with an inventory of a tree, so your community knows exactly how many trees are there, what resource you have that is at risk, and then you decide if you want to save the trees. You would have to, you would have to decide to either do it yourself, or you would hire somebody. And treesaregood.com is a great website. You just put in your zip code and you get a certified arborist, a list of certified arborists. And if you don't want to treat your trees, you're going to have to plan to pay for removing them. Okay. We also have got this smartphone app called the Purdue Plant Doctor. It's called the Purdue Tree Doctor. It's at purdueplantdoctor.com. And, in addition to, it can help you identify problems on 60 different genera of trees. But you look at pictures of the plants, and you get an idea of what you have. It has information about the emerald ash borer. It shows you some of the symptoms that you can see, and then you can match to take some photos to get an idea of your canopy thinning. This is sort of the critical 30%, and 40%, 70%. Then you've got that slide I've been showing you over and over again about 10, 30, and 50% thin, and then that can help you make your make your decision. In addition to that, this is free. We've got a a compiled guide that Dan Herms and Deb McCulloch and Dave Smiley and Whitney Cranshaw and I put together that compile a lot of the research that's been done on the insecticides for emerald ash borer, and is available free at the emeraldashborer.info website. So with that, I'd be happy to open the floor for questions.
Okay, we've got a couple. Last week you mentioned the blue ash was resistant. Why is that? Is anything being done to cross these trees with other ash trees to help with the EAB problem?
Why is blue ash resistant? We don't know exactly why it's resistant, but we believe that it produces something. There's something inside the phloem that slows the growth of the beetle, so that the tree can kill it. Okay, so we don't know exactly why. We don't know exactly why that is, but we do know that occurs. Now, there is a program, a big resistance breeding program that's going on. I know some folks in Ohio have been working on this, where they are trying to look at the mechanisms of resistance. And we know that there's a Manchurian ash tree that is resistant, and they are looking to try to understand why it works. They've identified a couple of compounds that these trees produce that actually are responsible for killing the beetle, and once they determine the mechanism of how it works, then they can try and expand to other varieties. Just to sort of summarize this more quickly, is that one of the things they're finding is that all the ash trees seem to have the capacity to kill emerald ash borer. They have a defensive mechanism that works. It's just that some species can detect them earlier on than others, and they turn their defenses on more quickly, and that kills the beetle. But if they wait too long, what happens is that the beetle harms the tree so much that it can't mount an effective defense. So blue ash is a native ash which is highly resistant. There are some white ash. It's about 1 or 2% of the white ash in the forest can indeed survive emerald ash borers. That's a very, very low percentage. But in the grand scheme of things, in a couple of 100 years, I think that bodes fairly well for ash trees remaining. But the ash trees, once the ash trees that are susceptible are going to die. Next question.
Okay. I live 2 miles from the Sam Golf Course. I'm not sure where that is.
Yes, that's right near where I took some of those. I took that picture of the dead trees.
Oh, okay.
That was the Sam Golf Course.
Oh, okay. My rather large ash tree is and has been treated with triage. It is doing great. The arborist actually took a picture of it last year to show the guys back at the office.
All right.
Is there a point that we may be able to stop treating our trees?
Now, yes, the answer is yes. And I would think that now you could stop treating the trees, but that does not mean so because you've been treating it every 2 years, that tree is protected. Okay. And what I would do is I would not pay to have that tree treated. I would pay to have your arborist look at that tree once a year to see if there's any evidence of fresh attacks, like woodpecks. And if there are woodpecks or any additional canopy thinning, then you can just start injecting that tree again. And you do it once, and then you wait until you start seeing more fresh woodpecks. Okay, because you're not going to have to do it every 2 years. And once again, that slide I showed you from Indianapolis, I mean from Eagle Creek Park, those trees were treated once every 3 years, and they were really, really wide. So at the very least, you want to spread it once every 3 years. And I would recommend, especially in that area, since the wave has passed there, I would say I would not be treating on a regular basis anymore.
All right, that looks like all the questions that I have at this point. So if that's it, I will be sending Cliff's contact information when I send you all the survey too, so in case you have questions later on. So with that, I would like to thank you very much, Dr. Sadof, for your
Thanks so
information.
much.
This was very interesting and good to know. And again, this is being recorded and will be on the emeraldashborer.info website hopefully by tomorrow. So
Okay.
thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you, Robin.
All right.
We'll talk. Bye-bye.
Okay.